I came across a video where I think it perfectly describes the difference between dogs and cats. The owner is feeding the dog or the cat food, and then in the dog's POV is, oh, this person gave me food. He must, or he or she must be God. Switching the POV to a cat, I must be God.
Exactly. The cats feel like they're entitled, and their dogs, you just give them like a little piece of meat or something off the table, and they're with you for the rest of their days. Frankie, what's going on? Huh? Trying to save the whole world?
Looks like he wants to
I
be
want
in
to be on the interview
He
too.
wants to be in the interview, huh? Huh? Why don't you introduce yourself, huh?
And what I'll never forget is that when I talked to the veterinarian, she says, don't bother going to vet school, just try to get into medicine. And never take your kids to a pet store. 8 out of 10 times, you're going to be getting getting an animal. So if you want to visit a pet store, don't bring the kids.
What's one animal you secretly don't like treating? Welcome everybody to the first episode of Language of the Pets. I'm your host, Calvin. This is our very first episode, so bear with us as we...
Right now it's raining pollen.
Yeah,
and it's 93
storming
degrees
here
in the middle of May, so it's been a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah. So it's not the pristine weather conditions, but I think we'll make it work. So yeah, you'll see us kind of brushing everything off here and there. So I have with me here Dr. Dan Lange.
Yes.
He is, how many years are you in the veterinarian?
In 1 week, I'll have graduated 44 years ago.
44
so
years.
Have a little
Okay.
anniversary.
So he has a little bit of experience in the world of animals, and this is something that he's been wanting to do for a while now. Started off in radio, correct?
I've done radio for 2 years, and then I recently work at a local animal hospital part-time.
Yeah.
And the younger, I call them kids, they're in their 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
And they said, I'm kind of missing the boat just doing radio. Only us old people listen to the radio.
Sure.
And so seriously, they thought if I wanted to get more of an audience, I should do some podcasts, and I was good enough to find you. So
Cool.
That's what we're doing.
Awesome, I'm excited. And if you haven't noticed, we're outside. We're in a farm, so very fitting. So, throughout each episode and in the future, you're going to see some dogs coming across screen, maybe
And
some...
sometimes the peacocks, they're in mating season right now. We have 3 in the cage behind me.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the train is what you call those feathers, and it's a mating call, so to speak. And so sometimes they'll start flailing. Now, a lot of times if they're nervous, the males won't raise their feathers, but
Okay.
we'll see what happens.
Yes. Okay. So we all know you're a vet. So give us, a quick 10, 15 second, 30 second overview of yourself.
Well, the joke is I retired 2 years ago. I'm throwing my wife under the bus, so just bear with me. And this is all tongue in cheek. But I retired 2 years ago, and about a year ago, she told me, you're really not doing your job very well here, cleaning the horse stalls. We have 2 horses. Not too long ago, we had a horse and a mule. And I tried to explain to her, well, men and women have a different idea on cleanliness.
Yeah.
And that didn't go over very well. And actually, about that time I got the lecture, so to speak, I had a headhunter call me, and it turns out there's an animal hospital just 10 minutes from my house here. And so I decided to get back into animal medicine part-time.
Okay.
And it's just about the perfect type thing, good group of people. And so that's what I've been doing on Tuesdays and Wednesdays each week.
Okay. So this is more part-time job for you.
It is. I work from 8 to 6, and I'll be 72 in the fall, and I love what I do, but those 2 long days, it's just enough that I enjoy it, but it doesn't become overwhelming, so it's just been perfect.
So would you say your full-time job is being a husband, stay-at-home dad?
It is,
Or...
yes. Probably, again, not doing a very good job, but what I tease is I'm not doing a very good job, but my wife hasn't gotten any replacements. So I don't think I'm doing that bad a job.
All right.
No, I kind of putter around, and I'm in a couple men's groups. I love pickleball, so that's kind of been my exercise.
Yeah.
Last couple of years, I got in with a group of people. We all kind of took our first lessons together and just hit it off. So a couple times a week.
That's been the trend lately, right?
I believe one day, and take this as a prediction, one day there'll be more pickleball courts than tennis courts. And I did play tennis when I was younger, so I enjoy tennis, but just so many older people have more time.
Yeah.
And of course the courts are smaller, so it's more apt for us that have less energy than we did in the past.
I see every time I drive around, what used to be tennis courts are now converted into two pickleball courts, right?
Right. Yeah, so you can get
it's
more pickleball courts than tennis ball courts. That means you
yeah,
get more people, and when we're inside during the winter, of course we pay for that. So
yeah,
it's a win-win for the owners
win-win for
as
sure.
well.
The way I see it is like it's the middle ground, happy medium between table tennis, ping pong,
That's exactly what
and
they say.
regular tennis.
Yep.
You know, you
Yep.
still get the exercise, but you don't have to run as much.
Back in my younger days, when we played baseball outside, we would have the plastic wiffle, or they were the plastic bats, I guess, and then we had these wiffle balls. Well, it turns out that a pickleball is almost the same as a wiffle ball, and so if somebody had told me 50 years later I'd be taking that wiffle ball, playing baseball, playing pickleball,
Yeah, yeah.
who would have known? So it's
Okay.
been interesting.
So has sports been your favorite?
It has been. It's a good way to get a lot of stress and strain off.
Yeah.
And I used to run quite a bit. Again, I'm out in the country, and if I go in the morning, I don't have to worry about cars or anything like that. And for 10 years, I did CrossFit. It was pretty strenuous, but it was interesting learning how to use your balance and, of course, all your legs and all that. So,
Okay.
so it's a really good to alleviate tension. So it's been real good doing part-time on the sports.
What sports did you play when you were younger?
I was wrestler. I lived in
Oh,
Iowa,
wrestling.
and some of you may know that Iowa was kind of a big wrestling school. Now the Oklahomas and the Penn States have kind of taken over, but for 25 years, University of Iowa, where I went as an undergraduate, was the NCAA double champ for 20 years in a row in wrestling. So it just was, and so I did some in high school, a little bit in college, but there was just too much competition, and at the time I was kind of pre-medicine, and I just didn't have the time. So I
Okay.
did some intramurals, but nothing else
Okay.
on a regular basis.
Yeah. Okay. So let's start from the beginning. How did it all start? Before Dr. Lang, how did Dan Lang become?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I had an interesting upbringing. I was what we call an army brat, but my dad and mom weren't in the service. It turned out my dad worked for J.C. Penney's, and on average, every 2 to 4 years, he would get a promotion. He'd be a manager of a small penny store, and if he did well with it, they would promote him to a different town that has a bigger penny store. And so I was born in Beloit, Wisconsin. It's the southern part of Wisconsin, right at the Illinois border. And then we moved to Milwaukee, and then we moved to Minnesota, back to Wisconsin, went to South Dakota, and then Iowa. And when we lived in Iowa, I was just finishing up high school, and so I went to school in Iowa. But
Okay.
when people in St. Louis area say, I've lived here my whole life or been in the same house, I just can't relate because
Yeah.
we just moved so
Yeah.
much. And at times it was kind of harder. The older I got, it was more difficult to make friends because I knew in a couple of years I'd
You'll
be
be going
moving
somewhere.
away. But when I look back now, it was quite a good experience. And most of the towns were like 5 to 10,000. They were more small, rural towns. And so we weren't farmers, but I got a little bit of access to some of the farm animals. And a few times I went with some of the local veterinarians, because back then they did a lot more large animal or equine than they do the small animal that the majority of us do today.
At what age was this when you were doing all this moving around?
Well, it was the day I was born. I lived at the one house in Beloit for a year and a half, and then moved to Milwaukee for 2 more years. And then I went on till 18 or 17 when I went to college.
Oh, okay. How much of that do you remember?
I don't remember, Beloit, we have cousins there, so I've gone back and I've
Okay,
seen the
so that's
house.
family.
And Milwaukee, and then we're in Illinois, in Decatur. I kind of remember that I was 5, 6, 7 at the time, so those are kind of my first memories.
Oh,
But my
okay.
mom became very efficient because I have 3 siblings, and having a family of 6, there's a lot of stuff that you accumulate.
Yeah.
And she was very good at kind of getting the stuff out that we didn't need.
Okay. So do you remember a key moment where, in your childhood when you first encountered animals? Tell us a little
Well,
bit about
my
that.
folks were not they did not have pets when they were growing up. And I think I was in 8th or 9th grade. We were in Minnesota at the time. And my dad went to one of the local breeders and bought a dachshund. So this was a purebred. I don't think there really were too many rescue groups. And it turned out, this was like 1965, my dad bought this dachshund for $50. Now, that may not seem very much right now, but that was a lot of money. And somehow I think my mom kind of manipulated my dad into getting the dog.
Usually
So,
it's the child trying to manipulate the
yes.
parents, right?
I don't remember we had too much influence. Because I get a lot of stories as a veterinarian
Yeah.
where they go to the pet store and never take their kids to a pet store
Yeah.
because 8 out of 10 times you're going
You'll
to be
walk
getting
away with one.
exactly getting an animal. So if you want to visit a pet store, and I'm teasing with the adults, just go by yourself. Don't bring the kids along. But I think in this case was my mom's influence, and we had the dachshund for I think 12 or 13 years, and so that was kind of my first
Okay.
having very close contact with the dog, and really seeing what unconditional love is. You know,
Yeah.
we don't see that very often in our world, but. It was just quite interesting with that. And then I look back, and a couple days, and again, this was in the 60s, we left the dog in the basement with food and water, and we went to see some relatives, and we came back, and the door of the basement was all chewed up. The dog had gotten so upset that it
Yeah.
just chewed it, and we called that separation anxiety.
Okay.
And I didn't know anything about that, but now I look back, you know, because I'm a big shot. I look, and that was separation anxiety. And then one time, well, there's a number of times, my mom would throw bones in the trash, and the dog, his name was Pete, would guard the garbage. And there's 6 of us trying to distract the dog to get to the
get the-
garbage.
yeah.
Well, that's kind of a dominance aggression type thing.
Oh,
So I
okay.
didn't know about it at the time, but I did learn some lessons that I didn't put all together.
What did you think it was? It was
Oh, I
just
just thought he just wanted the
misbehaving,
food.
or
Right, yeah, just behaving, or, you know, he just wanted those bones so bad, but it wasn't so much the bones, I think. He just wanted to show, you know, I'm entitled to these bones, not the rest of the family. So,
Oh, okay. Wow. So it's
so the
different
dog was
perspective.
kind of the main thing. We never really had any cats. We did visit some friends on farms, and, you know, I would pet the horses and the
Yep.
cow and that type of thing, but it was, you know, fairly limited experience with,
okay.
with that. And I'd like to say that I was born to become a veterinarian because I would talk to my classmates. We had a couple dinners before we actually started vet school in the fall, and we would all kind of tell stories how we got in, and I just felt like I just was kind of lucky enough to get in. I mean, how do you know when you're 17, 18, 19 what you really
Yeah.
want to do?
Yeah.
And actually, I had been training myself to become a human doctor. That's why I went to the University of Iowa, because they had the medical school there.
Okay.
And fortunately, I did not get in. Of course, I was pretty upset at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't have good scores. They call it the MCAT, but at the time it was kind of an entrance exam to see what your intelligence or knowledge was. And so I took a couple years off after undergraduate, and I was kind of frustrated because I got a degree in zoology. Well, you know, what are you going to do with that? I didn't think about it at the time, but you know, zoology is the study of animals.
Okay.
And so that was kind of my dream, but I didn't know what to do with it. And so a couple of years, I lived with my folks in Iowa. I worked in a steel casting mill.
Excuse me.
And, you know, just kind of decide what to do. I took an exam to become a wildlife biologist, and I flunked that because they asked for all these species of fish and birds, and I knew nothing.
There must have been a bigger plan for you.
Well, and then I was blessed that I, again, lived in Iowa. I got a job down at Washington University, the medical school there, and I worked in the lab as a research technician. And I got to meet a lot of the doctors, human doctors. In the basement, there was a veterinarian that took care of all the animals that they used for research. You know, the rodents, like you said, the
Yep.
rabbits, that type of thing. And of course, then it was not such a negative thing doing research in animals. I know it's become very controversial now. And what I'll never forget is that when I talked to the veterinarian, she says, don't bother going to vet school, because at the time there was only 14 veterinary schools in the country. She says, just try to get into medicine, because the odds with the few veterinary schools. Well, fortunately, a year later I applied and got in.
Okay.
And so I always want to go back and tell her, you
Yeah.
know, so. But anyway.
Was it a tight knit group then with a pool of veterinarians?
Well, we had a class of 110, and at Iowa State at the time, we actually had 3 periods during the school year. You know, most time you have semesters, and they're not quarters, but we had 3 periods, and then we would take finals at the end of each period. And but it was always the same group of people. So, you know, for 4 years, we all took the same classes.
Okay.
So we became very close. You know, at night we would study together in study groups because sometimes there was so much information. One person couldn't do it all. So we'd each take turns trying to learn the information, make some notes about it, and then
Okay,
pass
spread
it
the
on.
work. Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, we were really in tears when we graduated at the end of 4 years because none of us had any friends any closer than what we've been through. You know, all the tests you do. And at the end of the 4 years, over time, we had lost 10 classmates because they just couldn't keep up with their studies,
Gotcha.
type of thing.
Oh, okay.
So it was
So
kind
there's
of
a lot of
nerve-wracking.
camaraderie. Yeah.
It,
So those who stuck it through to the end, you know, you guys were
Yeah.
pretty close.
yeah.
And
And for a number of years, you know, back then, you know, Christmas letters were the in thing.
Yep.
And so we wrote letters and update each other if we had got married or had kids and all
Okay.
that. So it was pretty neat to keep up with everybody.
Yeah.
And I think at our 10-year reunion, we met back up in Iowa and we were all telling stories, what we had learned, you know, in veterinary medicine and
Yeah,
all that.
you all-
So,
Same pattern, right? You guys go out, do your work, and then come back and,
Yep.
and share your
Yep.
findings. Oh, that's very cool. So then, was there a key moment, you know, throughout your childhood or even throughout school? Because it sounded like you were trying to take this test, trying to get into this field, didn't work out, so you moved on to the next. But
Right.
was there a key moment that you remember that kind of, you know, sparked a flame inside and said, you know, I want to pursue being a veterinarian?
well, the interesting thing was the first year I applied to Iowa State, they told me later that I was 10 minutes late to the interview. Well, somebody had given me the wrong time because I'm very anal, for lack of a better word, about being on time for different events. And so I was penalized. Maybe there were other things. At that time, we had interviews. You know, I would talk to some of the professors or the veterinary board at
Yeah.
that time.
Yeah.
And so the bottom line is I didn't get in. And then that's when later I got it at WashU. And I was able to get a lot of the doctors to write
Okay.
recommendations for me.
Yeah.
And then I just had somebody said, you know, just go for it. And so the second time I applied, you know, I got in at Iowa State. And
So it
of
was
course
peer
in-
pressure.
So, yeah, exactly, exactly. I just saw that I admire people who do research, but for so many days you just repeat the same type of thing. You're kind of stuck in one room. And I'm still introverted, but I'd become much more outgoing, and the love of veterinary medicine is as much dealing with the people, the owners.
Okay.
Now, a lot of veterinarians will tell you, you know, they grew up, they wanted to help save the animals, and of course, I love the challenge of that, but it's actually the people that that's my motivation to do it, because having a pet, and now many pets myself, I know what a bond it is, and so I try to do everything possible to help that pet owner, and a lot of them become my friends
Oh,
because
wow. Yeah.
I would see them enough, or occasionally they'd say, well, Doc, why don't you come out and let's, you know, have a drink together, or let's go this or that, or the ball game, or something. And so for me, it's as much as the people that own the pets as the pets themselves, and that may be a little different than some of the other veterinarians.
So generally, you know, students that go into university, they go in knowing what they want to do, and then oftentimes, you know, 2 years in, 1 year in, they start to have doubts and
Yep.
wonder, you know, am I even a good fit for this?
Right.
Has that ever happened to you?
Well, what was kind of frustrating is that in hindsight, that like the first year it was all anatomy, and one of those tri-periods we learned about dogs primarily, and again, we would dissect the body and go through all the muscles, veins, arteries, all that.
Yeah.
And then a little bit of that section was cats. Well, then the next section of the tri-period, we worked on cows. They had
Cows.
carcasses of cows. They had been, you know, they were in formaldehyde. The smell of formaldehyde,
Oof.
I can't take it anymore. In fact, it's so bad that I will not eat liver because we would see formaldehyde in the liver, you know, just that smell
PTSD.
of liver. Yeah, exactly. And then the final period was equine. And I just thought, well, gosh, if I'm doing small animal, that was kind of my intention because I really had no experience with farm animals or equine horses. And I just wish now, because there's just so much information, that I think that we should kind of decide, and I think very few people change their mind, but their thought at the time was, oh yeah, you want to do small animal, but we've had a lot of students that once they got into it decide, yeah, horses is my thing.
Yeah.
But as I tease, if I had done all the other stuff that I would never use, I could have just gone for 2 years instead of 4 years.
Oh, okay.
And, you know, I've teased a little bit, but I just think there was a lot of stuff that that we weren't ever going to use, and maybe it was kind of a waste in hindsight. But it was certainly interesting, the different anatomies. It's amazing how animals are different, and
Yeah.
so I learned a lot from that.
Okay, that's very interesting and very cool. So then, okay, you didn't sound like you had really any doubts. You knew what you were going to do anyways.
Yeah, just so because that's. But I had never had a cat, and so when I first started practicing, oh my gosh, I I didn't really know the normal habits of cats. Now maybe because I'm getting lazier, I almost like cats better than dogs because there's probably less care that you have to do.
Yeah.
And we have a couple outdoor cats. They use a litter box outside. They have 5 acres for their litter box, so they're in good shape there.
That's luxury.
Right. And they'll come in, if it's really humid or cold type of thing. But cats are a lot easier to take care of. So I've kind of have a fondness more for
Okay.
cats at this point.
This is a side note, but I came across a video where I think it perfectly describes the difference between dogs and cats. And it goes, so like the owner is feeding the dog or the cat food, and then in the dog's POV is, oh, this person gave me food. He or she must be God, right? And then switching the POV to a cat is like, oh, this person gave me food. I must be God.
Exactly.
Is that how?
The cats feel like they're entitled. You're exactly
Yeah.
right. And their dogs, you just give them like a little piece of meat or something off the
Yeah.
table, and they're with you for the rest of their days. So it's interesting. I mean, a lot of people don't like cats because they kind of have a mind of their own.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some people don't like that. It's nice to come in and the dog's wagging its tail and wants
They're
to-
looking for that best friend, right?
Right. And that's the way that dogs were raised because many hundreds of years ago they were used as animals to carry stuff or keep wildlife away and that type of thing. So they've been kind of evolutionized to become closer to man, and cats have always been kind of independent creatures and still are. And some people just don't like that.
Yeah. Okay, so you've saved countless of animals, correct? Was there any moment where the roles were reversed? An animal has saved you?
Well, I think it's more emotionally that, I mean, everybody has their bad days. When I first started practicing in the 80s, there was an epidemic of a disease that we didn't know really what caused it. It's called parvovirus, and at the time we didn't know it was a virus. But all these dogs were coming in, and most of them were puppies, and a lot of them died even under intensive care. You treat them with fluids and antibiotics. And about a year after I had been in practice, we found out it was a virus, and not too long after that, there was a vaccine. Maybe it was kind of like the COVID virus for humans to a certain extent. But just the number of animals that died, even though you tried to do the best you can, I mean, it was pretty emotionally upsetting, and you kind of start second guess yourself. Well, maybe if I'd done this or that, maybe things could have been different, but we just didn't have enough knowledge at the time. And, unfortunately in veterinary medicine, money is an issue as well. But again, I just think a lot of it is the humans that I've learned. I mean, I think that's what's helped me a lot, or tell me, stay in the field. I think I'm helping the people, and I think
There's a greater
it's as
cause.
much, as much that than the animals.
Okay. Wow. So, not physically saved your life, but, it kept your passion,
Yes.
ignited
Yes.
and all that.
Yep. And it's a challenge because I have had people ask me certain questions like on insects. You're a veterinarian, you kind of know all animals.
Yeah.
Well, as
You
you
should
may
know
have-
everything that's not a human, right?
Yes, well said, Calvin. And I had read an article that right now mankind has discovered 900,000 types of insects.
Oh, wow.
And they think, the entomologists think that there's probably 3 to 5 million types of insects altogether that still have not been discovered.
Holy cow.
But people ask me on an insect, 900,000 types. And then one lady, it was a pickleball player, one time she says, well, what do you know about hush puppies? Well, the hush puppies is the food.
That's the only thing I was thinking of.
So she was giving me a hard time. I thought, oh my God, as if I haven't had enough. And of course she was, saying that to tease me. But even like with our peacocks, we were having a problem. We were trying to have the peacocks lay fertile eggs, and it's been kind of a challenge because that has not happened. And so I've had to do quite a bit of research because as I tease, in school we didn't have any peacock. Peacocks weren't high. Dogs and cats because they're
That's
companion
not part
animals.
of the syllabus.
Exactly. They're not a high number of people that own peacocks, so we didn't get very much. And so I find it kind of a challenging, but when people ask me questions about certain species like ducks or geese,
Yeah.
it's just frustrating because you just can't keep up with it. Even with just dogs and cats, like so many of our fields, I mean, there's so much information that it just...
It's hard to keep up with, right?
It's just really hard. And now, even in veterinary medicine, as some people may know, we have specialists. We have veterinary neurologists, veterinary dentists, veterinary dermatologists, because even in one field, it's just hard. And
It just keeps spreading, like
Yep.
the spider webbing all over.
And so the dermatologists, like our human dermatologists, they can just concentrate on those fields, because in the St. Louis area, allergies are horrible whether you have 2 legs or 4 legs.
Yep.
And so there's some cases, as general practitioners, we can't get under control. And so then we just refer them to the dermatologist. So,
Okay.
so it's just kind of overwhelming, but I look at it as more of a challenge to try to keep up with it. And then I had one doctor, he was one of our professors, and we had to go out and call at 3 o'clock in the morning. It turned out that a cow had pushed so hard trying to have a calf that it prolapsed its uterus. So we get out there 3 o'clock in the morning, and all this uterus is laying on the ground.
Oh man.
And of course, I'd never seen a prolapse
Oh.
uterus of a cow before. But anyway, as we got done, we went out for breakfast, and he says, well, I hate to tell you this, because we only had like 2 weeks left of school. Half of the stuff you learn will be proven wrong.
Oh really?
And so
Okay.
now I think, well, I shouldn't have gone to school just for those 2 years. I should have just
Yeah.
gone for 1 year.
Yeah.
Because half the stuff I learned is
You're
is gonna
learning
be
in the real
false.
world, right? Oh man, what's
So
the
that
point
was
of that?
that was kind of depressing, but
Yeah.
I don't know if it's half the information, but it is amazing how much things change, our outlook and that type of thing on our animals.
Okay. So, one question that I'm pretty curious about asking is, in your first year of being a vet, what is the weirdest thing that you've encountered or you had to deal with?
Well, we had a spider come in, and one of its legs had withered. It just had gotten
Okay.
atrophied or gotten smaller for whatever reason.
Was it like a tarantula size?
It
or?
was actually it was a tarantula.
Oh, okay.
I didn't have any spider stuff.
Yeah. So, did they have Google back then?
Yeah, and again, this was 1981. We still had encyclopedias.
Okay.
You know.
So you had to go to the local library.
Go to the local library because I had nothing. And actually, I'm kind of a nerd, but I kept all the information through the years. I mean,
Yeah.
some of it I've thrown because it is outdated.
Yeah.
But I actually still have a file of different articles that I've read through journals, and now I'll download and that type of thing. But I had nothing on spiders. Well, the pet owner was good enough, and all I did is I just amputated. I had a nail trimmer and just amputated the leg.
Okay. And then
and
no
the spider did
anesthesia
fine.
or anything like that, right? You didn't need to put it under.
We probably would have killed it because we didn't really have any protocols.
Dosage or
what's
whatnot.
the proper
Yeah.
anesthesia?
Yeah.
Do I give an injection? You know,
Yeah.
that type of thing.
Yeah.
And so we basically just kind of held on to it.
Okay.
And the spider didn't seem to fight it. But anyway, that was kind of my most memorable
Okay.
type because I
That's
had no
interesting.
knowledge.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just
Out of
have
the
to go
blue.
by, what have I learned or what can I do or what's common sense. And so.
Okay. So, whenever there's a spider
So
with
yes,
a leg.
I am a tarantula spider, and I say that tongue in cheek, but I am a tarantula spider because I had one case 39 years ago.
Yeah. You're an expert now. Awesome. Well, cool. Then, a little off topic, but then we'll go back into your career. But what is something the public generally gets completely wrong about being a vet?
Well, I think part of it is that we know everything, as you and I've kind of talked about, and so I try to tell them the limitations of our knowledge, and some expect that their pets are going to get through more severe diseases or issues.
Yeah.
And part of the problem is that animals hide their signs so well. Cats worse than dogs, birds even more than cats. And often by the time I see the animal, I mean, it's pretty much on its deathbed.
Oh no.
And the
Yeah.
people will tell me, well, it just got sick a couple days ago. Well, I look at the chart. Let's say a cat comes in. I had seen it 3 years ago. The cat weighed 15 pounds at the time. It comes in today. It weighs 8 pounds. Well, it didn't lose 7 pounds in
Over
the
that.
last couple days.
Yeah.
But because it's covered its sign so well, and you see your pet every day, you don't appreciate until it becomes drastic, and people say, yeah, it just got skinny over a couple of days. Well, it didn't, but because the pet seemed to act healthy until it got so sick. And so I need to rely on people with good histories, because my joke is that if the teenage kid comes in, he knows not, he just got back from school, let's say it's during break, he knows nothing about the pet, what's wrong, and so I don't have any history, and I can't ask the animal, which I've tried for 40 years, but I've not had any luck getting information from the animals. He is of no help, and so again, we need as much history as you can get to kind of help us. And so I think sometimes people maybe expect too much. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but
no, it makes sense.
It's just
routine
the limitations.
checkups.
And then finally, financial. I mean, yes, I would like to save every animal. I'm trying to think. Well, we just had something. Oh, I had a dog that came in and it was paralyzed on its back legs. Well, it turned out it had a herniated disc, that the disc material in the spinal cord had pushed upward, and it put so much pressure on the spinal cord, the nerves weren't going to the back legs.
Yeah.
Well, at that point, surgery is probably the only option. Yes, we have medications to try to alleviate the pressure, but
Just a Band-Aid, right?
right,
Yeah.
right. And if there's too much pressure on the spinal cord, they usually say that if a dog goes down within 2 to 3 days at most, you need to do something radical, and this would be doing surgery. Well, they had called the University of Missouri, and it would be anywhere from $6,000 to $9,000 to do the right. And that's the problem we have. That in some cases, and I understand, I empathize completely. And so maybe in one of the future podcasts, I will give people an idea of what some things they could do to maybe put a little bit of money aside, or pet insurance or something like that. But I just feel like we have a lot of obstacles with all the stuff we need to know, the poor history sometimes, and the financial. So there's quite a few challenges, and I'm not sure I answered your question, but I guess I'm kind of bringing up some of my pet peeves, obstacles that I have with animals. So
okay, so yeah, I mean, it was
hey, just what are people's
very-
expectations, or type thing I think you were asking, and I guess
well, it was
that's where
more
comes from.
like what the general public usually gets wrong about what to expect out of a vet, So
Well,
you're not.
I mean, they probably think we're just too expensive, but now we use digital. I just love this story. Is that when I first started practicing, '81, when we developed the X-rays, we would actually have to go into a dark room and develop the X-rays.
Oh, okay, like photography. Yeah.
Exactly. And I'd never done photography, and
Who knew?
so we took the pictures, and then you go in the dark room, you take the film out, you develop it, you fix it,
Yep.
and it probably took 10 minutes at the time, maybe 15, and sometimes we put on the screen, oh crap, we didn't get the whole animal in the view, or the animal moved.
Yeah.
Oh my God, we got to do this all over again.
Yeah.
And so it became very frustrating on that. Well, then 20 years ago, we finally got automatic developers of the film. It would take 5 or 6 minutes. We thought we were in paradise. This is unbelievable. Well, and then of the last 5 or 6 years, now we have automatic developers. We don't have to even figure out what's the right voltage, amps to develop it.
Yeah.
You just push the button.
Push the button and it comes
and then
out.
it comes right. Exactly. We don't have to worry about not taking it right. I mean, if the animal did move, no big deal.
No big deal. It's just another one.
And so it's just so much easier with all the X-rays. With that, now everybody wants to kick in. They want to tell their story. Frankie, you okay, buddy?
Yeah. So who's this guy?
Frankie, what's going on? Huh? Trying to save the whole world?
Looks like he wants
says,
to
"I
be
wanna
in
be on the interview
He wants
too."
to be in the interview, huh? Huh? Why don't you introduce yourself, huh? Okay, so let's talk about you. So you said that you were an introvert, right?
Right.
In heart.
Yep.
What?
And most veterinarians are. I
Okay.
have read some article that for some reason, to be a veterinarian, I think requires certain personality traits, and
Yeah.
one is that you don't have to be outgoing or sociable. Some of my classmates were very sociable, but I think a lot of it is just, you just put your nose to the books, because that's what we had at the time, and you just hang in there. I don't think you have to be intelligent. I just think you have to be very well disciplined. Like on Saturdays, I would take 2 subjects, and in the morning I would study my anatomy, and then maybe in the afternoon I do histology or something like that. But it would just discipline, I think, was kind of the main thing to do. But over time, I had heard somebody say, and this is of course the truth, not only do you treat the animals, you have to treat the people. Guess who pays the bills?
Yep.
It's the people. And some of my younger coworkers where I work now, they don't like to talk to people. They just get in the room, they give a quick exam, and then they're right out.
That's it.
Well, I want to find out where, like I said, everybody has a story, and now I'm almost as interested in the people.
Yeah.
Where they come from. I used to live in Minnesota many years ago. A guy came in a couple of days ago. He lived in Minnesota, so we talked about the Twins and the Vikings, the sports teams in Minnesota, and I knew what town he was from, and he knew what town I lived in, and so it was just kind of fun. I'd never met him before, but I just kind of learned where do people come from if they're not in the St. Louis area. How'd they get their pet? We deal with the pet store, and a lot of people get to the pet store, and I bet 8 out of 10 people going to the pet store, their intention was just to get food for the hamster or just to look.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the 8 out of 10
they walk away
come
with
with the
something.
dog. And these dogs are expensive. I mean, a lot of them are $1,500 to, I mean, in my book, they're expensive, $1,500 to $2,000.
Upwards of 10, whatever. Depends
So that's
on
a
the
lot of
breed.
money for just kind of a spontaneous.
Just to get into it. Yeah.
And I try to tell people, when you get a pet, you really need to look into it because dogs on average, you're going to have them 10 to 12 years. Some cats live to 21-year-olds. And the peacocks I had just read, trying to get ready for the podcast, is that in the wild, they live up to 21 years. But if you have them in captivity, they can live up to 40 years.
Oh, wow.
So it is a commitment when you get this. You just can't get a pet and decide after a year, I don't want it anymore, and just take it to a rescue group. So
that's a sad
so I think you
thing.
need people that kind of keep that in mind. But I know they're cute and this and that. And, peacocks are beautiful.
It's like a honeymoon phase for them, right? They
Well
just
said.
enjoy
I like
it,
that. I like
and
that.
then it just the fuse just goes off after that.
Well, especially in the wintertime, because with the horses and the pigs we have and the chickens, a lot of the water bowls get frozen. I mean, we do have some heaters, but it's just like this past January and February, it's so cold. We were out there trying to de-ice the water bowls and stuff like that, and we had to get extra hay for the animals so they could burrow under there to stay away from them. We have heat lamps for the chickens and all that, so it was a lot of extra work in the. In colder weather, as now almost have perfect temperatures. So it's a little easier on both the humans and the animals.
Yeah. So going back to it, I'm in the same boat as you. I probably grew up an introvert. I've always wanted to find a career path where I don't have to socialize.
Right.
It turns out, the very thing that you're trying to pursue to not be an introvert, turns out you really have to be an extrovert about it. Because I wanted to do photography and videography, so. Natural thing is to be behind the camera, not in front of the camera.
Right.
But turns out, the
doesn't
more work I do, the more I have to talk to, interact with the subject in front of the camera, and now here I am in front of a camera doing a podcast. So it's the more you try to avoid it, the more it sticks out in front of your face, I think.
And sometimes you just eventually just have to kind of force yourself, like yourself. And so many people want to see me, and it's not because I'm a good veterinarian. It's just that I talk to the people, and we all want to be talked to or be taken care of, and spend the time. Because a lot of times I'll go to a human doctor, and they kind of look at you, hey, you look good. They just don't really spend the time. And I know their schedules are different than ours, but we have 30-minute appointments. And by God, I'm going to spend the 30 minutes because I'd rather be there talking to the pet owners or taking care of the pet than sitting at my desk. Maybe it's because I'm trying to avoid looking up all the records on the computer. But now it's just great with all the people.
Oh, that's awesome.
My dad worked for J.C. Penney's, and a lot of times we'd be on vacation, and he'd have to go to a penny store and meet because he thought they were all kind of one group, all these J.C. Penney managers. And we were aggravated. We're on vacation. Let's forget that. And now as pet owners, I just think we all have something in common. We know the unconditional love they have, what it can be a burden, the price we have to go to when we lose our pets and so forth. So we all kind of have this common pond. And it turns out in the United States, there's 200 million people that own a pet. I mean, it could be part of a family, but 2/3 of the population has a pet at home.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of people.
And everybody's thinking about having a pet.
Exactly.
So cool. Then let's see. A little curveball at you. What's one animal you secretly don't like treating?
Well, it's definitely reptiles.
Reptiles.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're just in fact, most of the time it's the environment that's the problem, but they can't control their body temperature.
Yeah.
And so you have to have certain aquariums and heaters, and they don't have veins like most mammals. I mean, good
Cold-blooded,
veins.
right?
And so it's very difficult to get injections. And like a turtle, you know, if you're trying to examine a turtle, and of course, just bring its legs and its head into under the shell. It gets a little
How do you get through to
challenging.
that?
Yeah, but it's like a hedgehog. I like to work with hedgehogs, and
Oh,
when they get nervous, they'll just burrow up, and all their spines are there.
yeah.
And
They're
sometimes
trying to
I'll,
needle you instead of the other
exactly.
way around.
And so sometimes I'll try to put them in an aquarium and hold them up to look in the belly, but a lot of times they're just still so nervous. So a lot of times we just have to give them a light gas anesthetic with the hedgehogs. So challenges. But I think the reptiles in general,
Reptiles.
I've not had a passion. I have gone to some seminars, but I just couldn't get the passion to do it. And I feel like, you know, there's better people that like what they're doing with the reptiles. So.
Okay. Okay. If your younger self could see you now, what would he say?
I think if I was told that I would be doing this for 44 years, hopefully a little bit longer, just all the different types of people and animals that I've met and the challenges doing surgery. I mean, what I like is that when we were general practitioners younger, the only specialist was in the university. We didn't have any specialists in the metropolitan area. So if somebody wanted something done, we would just go ahead and try to do it. And as an example, if I had a dog with a broken bone, we had pins you could put into the bone and wires. And I didn't become efficient, but you know, 2 or 3 times a year, people would be good enough that they could afford the surgery.
Yeah.
And so one day I'm looking at a dog or cat with fleas, and then later that day I'm doing a surgery that's sedated. I'm trying to repair a broken bone, and I just feel like there's a lot of things that I could do. I mean, as a general practitioner, you try to do it all. We can't anymore, and probably couldn't then, but I think just the challenges. But I think the younger people were kind of brought up differently, that now that there's more specialists, if it's something I'm not comfortable with, you know, I'll just send it off to somebody else. And that
Okay.
kind of frustrates me because
Yeah.
I look back at some challenging cases that were successful, you know, it makes you feel pretty good that you're able to help that animal
Yeah.
and that type of thing.
Very
So,
fulfilling.
yeah.
Okay. What's let me see here. So what's going on now in you know your typical day? You know what you're still involved with animals, of
Well,
course.
as I may have mentioned, and maybe people can pick up, I just have such a passion for veterinary medicine. It turns out that there's roughly 131,000 veterinarians in the country and 600,000 veterinarians in the world. So that's a pretty small minority. And so I try to, as you and like doing the podcast, try to explain to people what goes through my mind as a veterinarian, what we try to do as a group.
Yeah.
And so I have the radio station. I do KTRS 550 AM every Sunday from 2 to 3, and I'll tell stories and explain certain things. Like this time of year with allergies, we just had a talk about that.
Okay.
And then I have written a book. It's at the editor right now, but I hope at the end of the year
Oh, you're
to,
publishing a
to
book.
publish a book. And again, it tell us. Now, it's not like James Harriet. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he was a veterinarian that practiced in Scotland in the 30s. And he wrote a number of books in the 50s and 60s, all creatures great and small. And he just told unbelievable funny stories about his relationship with clients and sometimes the animals that he dealt with.
Yeah.
And I read those books. He had 2 to 4 books, and I read a couple of the books before vet school, and I've enjoyed them so much more now as a veterinarian. I can kind of relate even more
Yeah.
to what he talks about.
Okay.
So I didn't just want to write about clients with my book. Part of it is medicine to explain like diabetes and heartworms, what we have for arthritis, how things have changed. Anxiety is so important right now. In the past, you know, if the dog came in nervous, we would just try to sit on it and do what we have to do.
Yeah.
Now we try to give medicines to alleviate the anxiety or give them treats, try to empathize more what this animal is going through. So a lot of things have changed in that. So in my book, I'm trying to explain some of the things of
Okay.
that sort. But I just want to kind of get across to people. Now that I have more free time, I work 2 days a week, but as I tease, Wednesday night I was done at 6, and I start my 5-day weekend.
Yeah.
And so then I'll start doing these things, you know, like the podcast.
So you'll stop work and then you'll start the weekend to go back to work.
Right, exactly, exactly.
Okay. So it sounds like
So now it's more my passion. It's less, you know, actually
Yeah.
practicing medicine,
Yeah.
but more my passion to kind of educate people, advertise our profession,
Give
whatever
back.
you want to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, give back. Because I just feel like I was so blessed. Like, you know, how do you know what you want to do? And I kind of fell into veterinary medicine, in my opinion. And, you know,
Okay.
I think I lucked out because how many hours do we spend working?
Yeah.
And if you don't like it, it
That's
gets
tough.
old very quick.
Yeah.
So,
So the next question I was going to ask you, I think you answered a lot of it, which was, what's next? So you finished your book, you're waiting for it to get published. Now you're doing this podcast, and you've been doing your radio show to try to give back to the public. So I think in the future, if you guys ever have specific questions you want to write in, have them answer, and you can answer them.
Well,
I
I
think that
love
would be
that.
great.
That's why I say at the radio station, I love if people call back. I mean, we do get calls on the phone or text, and I hate when people text, not just because I'm old, but if I have more questions when they text, I can't get back to them.
Yeah.
But if people would call on the phone, and I know when somebody calls, it's an old person, but then I can kind of go back and forth and get more information with it. But I give my phone number on air at the radio station and my email, and I do get some emails, what should I do? And I say, I haven't seen your pet, so there's limitations, but I will give you my opinion from your history, what to do. And that is my passion, because it kind of forces me to do more reading and research and keeps that brain, stimulated. So, so it's just trying to help other people is kind of not just directly at the animal hospital, but just kind of all over. That's And now I'm still excited with the stuff I'm doing. So at this point, that's kind of what I'll continue.
Okay. So we may not, blur out your phone number to the YouTube channel or wherever you may be listening to, but I think we're gonna figure out a way that the viewers like you guys could submit your questions. If it's not call in, maybe they can write an email or something like that.
Emails
we can go
great.
through it.
I tease. Before I maybe would check it once a week, but now I've gotten better that I check my emails almost daily.
Okay. yeah. So hopefully we could flood your email, but maybe every episode we'll pick out two emails and go through it to kind of help answer these questions. But obviously there's a disclaimer. You can't be there.
I'm just giving you my opinion, because it's not fair to me to give a diagnosis when I haven't seen the pet, or often I haven't seen the lab results if tests were run.
At least,
but I can tell people maybe kind of how to approach it or what things to ask the doctor.
Exactly. Point them in the right direction at least, right? Okay.
Well
That's
said.
good. Cool. Then let's see. We have a few more questions before we wrap it up. Again, this first episode, so if you guys have any questions that you want to ask Dr. Lange, personal, career-wise, plans of the
some
future,
people,
whatever.
do they want to get into veterinary medicine?
Yeah.
And I can give them ways to, go visit an animal hospital and ask if you can walk around one day or watch some of the surgeries. I've had a couple people, lay people, go into surgery on a mask and all that, and a couple of them fainted. And I'm thinking, well, you learned right
There's
now.
your answer.
You're not going to pursue that field unless you get into research or something like that. But it seriously is a good way to find out if this is something that would be a passion for you, because you can read about it, but unless you see us, or I have some people come in and just be in the exam room with me, and they watch, how I give an exam and see how we interact with the animals and all that. So I'd certainly be happy to help people if are interested in approaching veterinary medicine. And it's more than just practicing. There are other things that veterinarians do as well. So
cool.
I can lead them on that.
Okay. So I think the viewers will know what they want out of this podcast. I want to ask you, what would you like to get out of this podcast?
Just maybe I'm sounding like a preacher, but just to pass the word.
Just pass the word.
Again, to try to provide more knowledge. As an example, heartworms are blood parasites, and every day somebody comes in and they bring in a stool sample to check for heartworms. Well, that will check for intestinal parasites, but it won't check for heartworms because they're in the blood. And so it's just things like that we take for granted. Doesn't everybody know that heartworms? Well, of course not. People don't deal with it. Or why do we give prevention every month? There's a good reason, because it's expensive. We're not doing it just to get $1 on our side. There's truly, prevention is much better than waiting to have to treat. In the past, we would treat animals. Now we're trying to be more prevention with vaccines, checking for parasites, blood work, and all that. So
interesting you brought that up, because the next question I wanted to ask is, what are common mistakes we are making with our pets?
I tell people for every calendar year, most pets age 6 to 7 years. So we definitely need to get the pet in once a year. I know it goes by fast, but most of us humans, especially us older humans, usually once a year we see our human doctor. And so as a bare minimum, you need to bring the pet in once a year. If we consider it a senior citizen, We usually
Maybe there's
recommend bringing the
Medicaid or
pets in
something.
twice a year.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
And the peacocks are saying maybe 3 times a year.
Yeah. They're
Or
chiming
maybe
in.
they're saying don't go in because things happen.
Yeah. Look what happened to me. I'm in a cage now.
Right? Yeah, look.
Don't do it. Okay. That's awesome. Cool. Well, I think that kind of wraps it up for our first episode. If you have a message to our viewers, go ahead and.
Well, I
tell.
just asked them to listen to more podcasts because I just have a lot of information I just want to
Mm-hmm.
pass on. And, again, I really like the interaction with emails or that type of thing.
Yeah.
Just to help people. So
Okay.
that's it.
Pretty
Or listen to
straightforward.
my radio station on Sundays from 2 to 3.
Yeah.
I know you have to be older to listen to radio, but if you have a chance.
Yeah. Hopefully, maybe this podcast will drive people to tune in on your radio
Yep.
station.
Or ask more questions with your veterinarian. A lot of times I know with my teachers during school, I would never talk to them because they can be kind of intimidating. Or my human doctor, but I've learned, they're definitely human beings. And if you ask me questions, but I can't answer everything if I don't know
Yeah.
what your main concerns
Yeah.
are. So
Yeah.
I just ask people to get a healthy interaction. Don't hesitate to call on the phone. I take messages all the time
Okay.
on that to help people out. So
Okay.
And I'm talking at work as
Yeah.
well as at
Sure.
home on the emails.
Sure. Yeah. Anything to do for you to help other people, right?
Yep.
Cool. That's
And
a
then
great
it gets
message.
me out of my honeydew chores too. Now don't tell anybody, okay? It's just between you and I.
So you
It's
can retire from your full-time job. Yeah. Right on. Well, you want to sign us off?
Frankie, I think you're passing on all the information there.
Yeah. All right. Well, this wraps it up for the first episode. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment down. What would you like to see in future episodes?
I would definitely like the feedback.
Yeah.
Was somebody really interested? Because I know what I'd like to pass on, but I may be missing the boat on
Yeah.
some things.
Yeah.
So if people have some interest, what our profession does, what are options for our profession, or just with their
Yep.
pet themselves,
Yep.
that there's some abnormality. Most time there's an abnormality is something we don't understand. I mean, it's something that can be easily fixed. It may
Yeah.
be behavioral or the animal's in pain
Yeah.
and not truly a disease. So.
Cool. So yeah, drop a comment, leave feedback, questions, and subscribe, like, you know the deal. So thank you, Dr. Lang,
Thank
and
you.
we'll see you on the
Thanks
next
for your
one.
good questions.
All right.
I'll be here.
Yeah.